Hi, it's me, RachaelLyn, and I am here to tell you about how I got to be $172,000 in debt. Let me start off first by saying how embarrassed I feel about this right now. I am so super embarrassed about this, but I feel like I have to tell this story. I have to get it out there. I have to share it because literally I'm scared to death, you guys. I am so scared and I'm not really sure how to deal with it. And I've talked to my parents, and my dad is just, he's like Jimmy Buffett. Oh, don't worry, things be fine. No, it's gonna be okay. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how I got to this point in my life. Real quick, I don't have any credit card debt. I used to, up until last year, but I paid it off. That's a whole nother video. And second of all, I don't have a car payment. I paid that off about 1.5 years ago. And third of all, I don't have any other kind of debt except student loan debt. That's it. Every single penny of my debt right now is student loan debt. So I went to Eastern Kentucky University. It's a great school and has a great program for what I went to school for, even though I didn't start off going for that. I actually started out in music and then changed my major at the end of my freshman year. So anyway, I went to EKU, and I had, gosh, I don't even know where to start. Oh my gosh. Okay, so before I even went to college, I went to a Dave Ramsey FPU class with my parents. This was maybe like 1999, 2000, so that tells you how old I am, maybe. So I went to an FPU class with my parents. Of course, I didn't pay for it. I was just kind of like there. And I learned some things, but I was in high school. I didn't care about that stuff. I didn't care about saving money. I didn't care about any of that stuff because it didn't apply to me. And, I just didn't care. And I don't know. I was more interested in spending money than I was about saving it. So I went to school, and my parents promised to pay for my college education. And they didn't have any money. Now, mind you, they went through the Dave Ramsey class, but they didn't have any money. And so they said, well, get out student loans and we'll pay your student loans back. So I got out student loans. I did what my parents asked me to. They asked me to get out the full amount that you could, and I got out the full amount that I could. I'm sure I sent them the difference, because I'm sure it was probably sent to my house. I don't know. I never saw any extra money for myself. And I did work in college. I actually worked in Louisville. So it was like an 1.5-hour drive to my work. And I worked on the weekends. So that's kind of where I got my spare money from. At least my freshman year, I had that one job, and it was stressful. I actually failed the class because I didn't go on Fridays so that I could go home and work extra. More embarrassing stories. It was an easy class too. It was just attendance that I just didn't show up. So anyway, gosh, I had several jobs throughout college, didn't I? I'm thinking of all the jobs that I had. There were some times that I didn't work in college, but most of the time I did actually work. I just spent all my money, and actually my junior year, I moved off campus, and I think I had my parents help me out a little bit with that, since they weren't paying room and board, and they weren't paying for a meal plan anymore. They helped me out, with that. I think I remember coming to them with a plan, and I had a PowerPoint and everything of why I should live off campus and how it would save them money and how it would help me. And yeah, so anyway, I lived off campus. I lived in the dining room. that's another story for another time. Interesting life, interesting life. I continued to get whatever student loans I could get, and that money went to my parents. I didn't use the money. I didn't see the money because they were paying for my student loans, so that was their money to pay back. Now, I'm not trying to put like all the blame on my parents, because you know, they encouraged me to get scholarships, and they encouraged me to, you know, try to do things like that, but I didn't work very hard at it. The point is, I did what they asked me to do. And I'm not totally blameless, because I'm getting to that $72,000. I'm getting to that. So I graduated college. It took me 5 years, so there's a whole extra year of student loans to get right there. And it took me 5 years because I had changed my major. I had I at least got a minor in music, although that does me absolutely no good. But it's kind of fun to say that I have a minor in it, since, you know, I spent all that time my freshman year taking music classes. I at least got that much. And I graduated, and my first year graduating, I actually, the last couple of years that I was in college, I actually did kind of like a nannying job. She's in high school now. That's how old I am. A little girl I babysat in college is in high school now. Okay, get back on track. So I had been nannying for this girl, and she had one more year left before she went to kindergarten. I am so loyal to a fault. I'm such a Hufflepuff. And that's embarrassing to admit too, but I should not be embarrassed about that. Hufflepuffs are loyal and true and friendly. Yeah. So anyway, I am loyal to a fault. I really am. And that has gotten me in a lot of financial trouble throughout the years, because I will stick with the same phone plan. I'll stick with the same car insurance. I'll stick with staying and living where I am just because I want to be with the people that are there, and I don't want to go out on my own, because I want to like fulfill like my job, I guess, and I don't want to move on to improve myself if it's gonna like hurt somebody else. I mean, not like hurt them, but I mean, like, you know, put them out in any kind of way. Like, oh my gosh, we have to find a new babysitter because you're leaving town. Like, that's a minor inconvenience in the long run. It really is. But to me, it's like, I can't do that to them. I just can't. I had friends that still lived in town, and, you know, slowly though, all my friends moved away, because I continued to live. Richmond, Kentucky is where I lived, and that's where EKU is. And I stayed there. I mean, I ended up living there for like 10 years. I mean, including college, I lived there for about 10 years because I couldn't move away. I didn't want to leave. And so, I waited to even find a job for a year before that little girl went to school. And that put me so far behind in getting a job right out of college. I wasn't willing to move for, you know, another like 6 years until after I graduated, because I don't know. I was so stupid. So I tried working in part-time jobs in my field, and I just like it was just so hard. I was working 5 jobs at a time. When I got my current car that I'm sitting in now, Phoenix is her name for a reason. And when I got Phoenix, I had to take on a job. I started working at Culver's just to help pay for her. And I worked at Culver's for a year. So anyway, I'm getting off track again. I do that really easily. I didn't have a job. I mean, I worked. I mean, I had like 5 jobs at once. So, I mean, I worked a lot. But I worked to live, to pay the rent. A year out of college, I was no longer babysitting, nannying, however you want to call it. I was no longer doing that. And I had to figure out what to do. I couldn't get a job in my field in that area. That's the big key, because I didn't even look anywhere else. I got like a part-time job in my field, which hardly paid anything. And so I was convinced that I needed to go back to school, and that I needed to get my master's. and that that would help, and that by the time I finished my master's, I should have found a job in my field, and that it wouldn't be a problem. And that is another huge mistake that I made in my life, was going back to school. And yes, in my field, I would have to get my master's at some point. It's just a requirement. But I didn't have to until I had been working for a few years. Actually working, not just part-time. Like, I could have waited. And I didn't wait. And I even, because remember, I'd heard of Dave Ramsey long ago and listened to him before and would turn him on sometimes and turn him off sometimes. I was kind of convinced, and my parents, they were all for it, because that meant that you know, my loans would be deferred until I graduated with my master's, which meant, you know, they didn't have to pay on my student loans yet, you know, my undergrad loans. So I just did it. I went back to school. I got my master's. It took me 2 years. At the end of my master's, I realized that I didn't get my master's in exactly the right thing, and that I should have gotten it in something else. So I continued school for 1 more year to get an extra certification. So here I am. I'm very well educated. I have my bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree. But I am one of the stupidest people in the entire world. I incurred a whole bunch of more student loan debt. And this time that student loan debt was mine. My parents made it, they made it very clear that they were not paying for my master's degree, that they were only going to pay for my undergraduate degree. So here I am. I've got my bachelor's, never paid a dime on. I've got my my master's now, which is all on me. And not only that, but when I got my master's, I took out the full amount that I could possibly take to live on. I paid my rent, I paid my bills, I paid for my groceries, I paid for, you know, going out to eat. The initial amount was probably, I think my undergrad loans were probably about $45,000, which isn't too bad, I guess. And then my master's, I think, was probably about $30,000. So then I had my master's. So here I am, more educated, worth more money, with absolutely no experience. Nobody wants to hire me. And not only that, but I still didn't want to leave the area. Finally, in 2012, actually 2011, I did start looking elsewhere, but 2012 is where I really fought for a job. And I looked everywhere. I'm certified in the state of Kentucky for what I do, and so I looked everywhere. I did love living in Richmond, but that's where all my friends were. It's where all the people were. And once I looked up and realized everybody had left me behind, I finally realized it was time for me to leave too. And so, I mean, it just took me way too long to realize it. Like I said, I'm very well educated, but I'm one of the stupidest people in the world, because I just remember feeling like, oh, I looked up and no one lives near me. No one. Hello? Even the family that I nannied, they left. They moved. They moved to a whole other state. I was with them for a long time. They left. I used to babysit another family that lived nearby very often. They left. And all my friends were gone. And it was just me living in a college town. So it was just, I mean, I literally looked up and everybody was gone. And I got left behind. I really did. I was just so stupid and so overly loyal that I made huge mistakes. And so because I couldn't find a job in that area, you know, I was in school, so that kind of deferred my loans for a little bit. I had like 5 jobs, but that barely paid the bills. I kept going through forbearance because I kept forgetting about my loans. And so like they'd call me up and they'd be like, hey, you haven't paid in several months, you know, let's try to work something out. And I'd be like, well, I can't pay. And they'd say, well, we can put you through forbearance. And, you know, they say interest accrues, and I have no idea what they're saying. And, you know, I should have been a lot smarter about that, but I wasn't. I just kept letting it go. If I wasn't in forbearance, then I was in income-based repayment at $0 a month. And then when the income-based repayment would run out after a year, because you have to change that every year, you know, so that they know, like, you know, fill with your tax forms and all that so that they know how much you're making, then I would forget, and then I'd have to go back through forbearance, and that's adding, you know, late fees, and I just kept forgetting about it. And here they are, they're adding late fees, they're adding interest is accruing and accruing and accruing. And on both my undergrad and my graduate degrees, both of them, I don't know why my parents never asked me about, you know, paying them. I guess I kind of think that maybe they thought since it was income-based repayment, then, you know, if it was $0, then I was kind of taking care of that, and they didn't have to pay if I didn't have to pay. And so I guess maybe that's kind of where they were at. And I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking, like, with them not having to pay when they said that they would pay for my undergrad. My undergrad loans are currently, it's all one big loan, because at some point my parents had me consolidate the loans, which I've learned you should never ever do that. So those loans were all consolidated into one, per my parents' request. You know, I trusted them and that they knew what they were doing and what they wanted to do with that, and so I did what they asked me to maybe like help them out. And I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue what I was doing, and I was completely messing up both loans. So fast forward to 2012, I get my first full-time professional job. I think I was still on income-based repayment. I think it was still like $0. I can't remember how much I made in my first job. I do remember being like, well, this is a lot of money, and it's all from one paycheck instead of, you know, here's a whole bunch of little bitty paychecks all thrown together. But that just continued even though I had that professional job. And then I ended up at the end of that job, which I knew was only for 1 year. That job ended in 2013, and I had to move for that job. I lived in Carrollton, Kentucky. I don't remember if I kept putting the loans through forbearance or if I was down income-based repayment. Honestly, I can't remember, because I kept forgetting about my loans. I just kept on forgetting about them, and I didn't worry about them, and I should have been. And then at the end of that job, I didn't have anywhere else to go. So I moved back home to Louisville and moved in with my parents, and I didn't have a job. And that was an extremely, extremely low point in my life. I went on unemployment. I didn't have any job prospects. I went through a severe bout of depression, which I've talked vaguely about on my channel. But it's just a really, really, really bad time in my life. Like, oh, I'm getting choked up just even thinking about it, just because of how terrible it was. But you know, that point in my life, what it did for me is it taught me that I do want to live, and that I want to live the best life I possibly can. And that's where I really started my YouTube channel. Then in 2014, like right at the beginning of the year, I think I found out maybe like December 31st, I think I might have found out, that I got a job. But it was only for a few months. I lived in northern Kentucky, which is near Cincinnati. Northern Kentucky is like this big area. Like huge area. It's like 3 counties. that are like right on the river, really close to Cincinnati. And I lived with my friend's parents. Since the job was only for a few months, they let me live there rent-free. It was just awesome because I was able to save a lot of money. I had credit cards at that point. I paid off all those credit cards. I started losing weight through this channel and through hard work. And I lost a lot of weight, and I was doing great. And I knew again that job was only for a few months. And so when that job ended, I worked hard while I had that job to find another job, like right away. And I found one. And there was like a 2-month period between the two jobs. And that was great because it gave me time to find a place to live, which was again in the northern Kentucky area, except somewhere different. And I found myself a place to live in between these two jobs, and I was able to live at home with my parents for a couple months. Well, I had gotten myself out of credit card debt, all the while ignoring my student loans, mind you. And then at the end of that job, my parents went on a cruise, and I wanted to go with them, and I got a new credit card. And I went with them. The reason why I went with them is because my grandmother had passed away like the year before. And I didn't get a chance to visit her that year because I was on unemployment. I was so depressed, and I didn't want to go anywhere. And I didn't have any money, and it was just like that bad time. And I never visited my grandmother, and she passed away. And I'm going to cry now because she passed away and I didn't get to see her. And so when my job ended and I knew that I had another job lined up, I decided to go on this cruise because you just never know what life is going to bring you. And it was just one of those, like, you got to seize the moment. And my dad's all for that. I mean, I grew up with my dad who's like that, just, he's very spontaneous and take life as it comes and don't worry too much about the stressful things. I mean, my dad, let me just put this out here. My dad is one of the hardest workers ever. I mean, my dad really is like my hero. But sometimes when I'm a little bit worried about something, it doesn't really help when you say, it'll work itself out. Even if it's true, that doesn't always help. At least not my mind that just goes like a million miles a minute. So anyway, I went on a cruise, put that on my credit card. And I had lost all kinds of weight, and I was going on a cruise. So I bought a whole bunch of new clothes and I put it on a credit card. Anyway, I just ended up spending all kinds of money on my credit cards and putting money on credit cards and putting money on credit cards. And then I found a place to live, but it was way more expensive than than anywhere I'd ever lived before. And I just got myself into more credit card debt, which, of course, I'm still ignoring my student loans, forbearance, income-based repayment, that's $0 a month. All of that just keeps accruing all this time, my whole life. I kept working there. And then it got to the point where it was time for me to leave, and it was time for me to come back home to Louisville. It was the right time, because if I stayed there any longer, that loyalty thing that's inside of me, I would want to stay there forever. And I didn't want to stay there forever because I wanted to be with my family. And, I hated driving 2 hours to see, to spend time with my family or to see my family. I had my dog. She was left alone so much. And the apartment that we were in, I had to take her out in order to go potty and all of those things. And it was just I couldn't live in that apartment anymore with Lucy. It was just too hard. And way too expensive too, because the rent was going to go up, and it was just a lot of stuff. It was just time. It was the perfect time because I had to get out of that apartment. So I left, and I am currently living at home with my parents and my brother. My brother lives in the basement. My parents' rules have always been you have to pay rent and you have to have a job. And the rent is very minimal. I pay $200 a month to live at home. It just covers like the extra water, extra electricity, extra food, because I don't pay for food either. So it just kind of covers all that extra stuff that that I use up living there. So all of that comes down to last year. Last year I came into some money, which will be a whole nother video, and was able to pay off my credit cards, and so I'm out of credit card debt. Now all I have is my student loans. Well, I had finally reached the worst part of ignoring your student loans that you can do, and that is my loans went into default. All this time I had been able to get them caught up either through forbearance or through income-based repayment, you know, and keeping up with it that way. All this time I had been able to recover eventually. Well, not this time. They went into default, and that's not what you want to happen. So I have 2 loan servicers for my undergraduate, or for my graduate loans, and then I have 1 for my undergraduate loans. And my undergraduate loans have gone from about $45,000, because of course they charge you like 18%, like a one-time 18%, when they're in default, and all the interest that's accrued and all of that. So my undergraduate loans are now $99,299.92, and that was like 2 weeks ago when I finally like called them up and tried to work something out. That's where $100,000 comes from. And then my graduate loans, one of them is it's about $12,000, and then the other one's like a whole bunch of them in like one servicer, and that one is like about $60,000. Yeah, $60,000. So I have about $172,000 in student loan debt, and I'm responsible for the 62 that should have only been 30,000, 30, 35, somewhere in there. And I have $100,000 in student loans that should have only been 45,000. I may be well educated, but I am one of the stupidest people in the world. And it's embarrassing, and I am like scared to death because it's a lot of money, and I am in loan rehabilitation for all 3 of those loans. Although I read somewhere that you can only rehabilitate 1 loan at a time, which doesn't make any sense, because I told every single one of them that I like was fixing other loans, so they didn't say anything. So I don't know. But that was only one place that I read. I've read a lot recently about student loan rehabilitation. So that is where I am right now. My undergraduate loans, my parents are kind of covering. My current payment for that right now is like $215. So my parents and I have made out a deal. I pay for that, and I just don't pay them rent, because that pays my rent each month. And then my other loans, like I'm paying about the same, a little less on one, and the exact same on the other, $215, and $144 for the $12,000 one. I'm at a loss for what to do. I don't know if it would benefit me to go ahead and pay extra right now, or if I should just pay the minimum payments. I don't know if I'm ever eligible for loan forgiveness, because they've gone through default, and now they're going through rehabilitation. I don't know. And so I don't even know what to do right now. I just know that I am in so much debt that I don't even know what to do. Yes, the 100,000 is on my parents, and my parents and I have talked about it. They don't seem too upset that it has more than doubled. I mean, they seem a little disappointed, but they don't seem too upset. They just kind of, like I said, they just kind of seem like it's just going to work itself out. And they don't seem willing to put any extra towards it, at least right now. So I don't know. I don't know how that's going to look, and I mean, it worries me because those loans are in my name, and I'm just worried about so much. That's why I wanted to start YouTube over again. Yes, I need to lose some weight and get back on track with that. But I also wanted to document the rehabilitation progress and the program, and if I can help somebody avoid this situation, I want to do that. If I hadn't gotten my master's, then actually I would feel really stressed about it, just because it's a lot right now if it ever got to this point. But I don't think it would have ever gotten to this point. If I hadn't gotten my master's, I would have just like given my parents the pay, you know, the little stubs that come in the mail. I don't even know if they do that anymore. Little stubs that come in the mail that you have to mail in with your payments. Like, because I did give that to them, but that was before I went back to school. And so then my loans were deferred and they didn't have to pay. And if I hadn't gotten my master's, I probably would have just given that to my parents and been like, here you go, you take care of it. And they would have taken care of it. And those loans would have been gone by now. I just want to help people, and I don't know what to do right now. And so if you know what to do, if you know whether I should like pay extra right now or if I should wait, that's kind of my big question. Should I pay extra while they're in rehabilitation? Will that look good? Will that be bad? Will it not really go against towards the principal? I don't know. And so if you know answers to those, please let me know. If you are in a similar situation, if you have student loans, please make a comment down below. Let me know your student loan situation, your student loan story, and we can help each other out. If you want to watch me through this journey, hit that subscribe button. We'll walk this journey together. Right now, my goals are just to save as much money as possible and not spend and to spend as little as possible. So those are my goals right now, and just kind of trying to figure all this out and what to do, and to have that support, because like I said, my parents, it'll work itself out, and maybe it will, but I need some action. I need to know what I need to do. And right now, I'm just saving money and not spending any money. Please let me know what's going on with you, and if you've ever experienced anything like this. I need to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's a cloudy, gloomy day, and that's how I feel right now. Alright, well, next thing is, there's a book that I want to read, and I'm not going to buy it from Amazon like I normally would. I'm going to go to the library and go check it out at the library. Save some money. I will see you in the next one. Bye.